Like so many things in life, this all happened because of a Hot Tuna concert. Although I suppose some would say it all happened because I saw this Chris Christopherson movie in 1973. Or arguably, it happened because I flipped a coin on an airplane in 1971. Um, some would also say it happened when I cracked the code of this horse racing slide rule called the Kelco calculator and figured out the formula for myself. Others would say it happened because I got a job in the public library when I was a junior in high school. Arguably, it might have started the day that my baby stroller hit a bump on a Williamsburg sidewalk, causing me to spill out of the carriage and bite my lips so badly that I required plastic surgery at the age of 4. And then I suppose it all could say to have been started on March 20th, 1954, at Unity Hospital in Brooklyn, when I finally decided to give my mother a break after 3 days in labor and come out to see what this world was like. I guess in reality, all of those little things I just described were flaps of butterfly wings that led to the story that I'm about to read to you. And yeah, I'm going to read this time. I might stop and blather some commentary, but without further ado, I'm going to open the laptop. Oh, look, I get the reflection of the laptop in my eye. That's how you know I'm reading and not just blathering. Anyway, I did a lot of writing in 2006 and 2007. And I'll talk about why I did that in later episodes. I kind of want to keep these things to 10 minutes if I can, because I know my attention span is not much more than that, like ever. Anyway, this was written on July 26, 2007, in Fullerton, California. Every one of the things I've written has a little prologue. This one has a prologue that's only like one or two sentences. So the prologue goes like this. As it turns out, the day the sheriffs took me to prison was a day I had very much been looking forward to. Now we get to the actual story. Albany, New York, March 12th, 1976. I won't bore you with too many of the boring penal code details, but the fact remains that my time in county jail was doing nothing to shorten my sentence. I'd been sentenced to 1 year to life. Yeah, 1 year to life. Thank you, Mr. Rockefeller. 1 year to life, which meant I'd be eligible for parole after 1 year in the custody of the New York State Department of Corrections. Now, those last 11 words are ugly because Albany County Jail is run by the county and not by the state. So my time in county jail did not count one single minute towards that year I needed to do in state prison before I could even be considered for parole. Yeah, 1 year to life meant I was sentenced to life under the Rockefeller drug laws of the 70s. You can look those up. I could talk about them some other time. But there was a whole big thing. Life sentences for pushers. And they put LSD in the same category as cocaine, heroin, speed, and actually, I think speed was a lesser sentence, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was just LSD, cocaine, and heroin that carried life sentences if you were caught selling it. So, yeah, so I was basically sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 1 year. I was given, basically, had I fought this at trial and I had a pretty good case, not that I was innocent, I wasn't, but all the evidence was quote unquote destroyed in testing. So they had no physical evidence on me. And I could have fought it in court, but had I fought in court and lost, I wouldn't have been eligible for parole until 8 1/3 years. And as much as of a gambler as I'm known to be, one thing I don't gamble with is time. And I knew thought I could survive a year, was pretty sure I could survive a year, and was pretty sure I could not survive 8 1/3, at least not come out anything like I'd hoped to come out. Okay, so we've established that my time in a county jail doesn't count towards anything. Now, 1976 happened to be a leap year, and I'd been taken back into custody after I entered my guilty plea on February 23rd. Being locked up in county jail on February 29th, that was like the longest day of my life, February 29th. It didn't count, and it was an extra day on the calendar. Also, Albany County Jail was a terrible place. There were often bugs in the food, fights in the mess hall. Visitors spoke through a metal mesh located about mouth level, so it was impossible to look at the person talking to you and also hear them. To hear them, you had to bend your ear to the mesh, and if you did that, you couldn't see the face of your visitor. And I had a lot of visitors. That's what happens when you're in jail in the same county as the university you've attended for the last 4.5 years. 4.5 years plus a summer. So I did a lot of bending down and not looking into the eyes of my friends when they talked to me in the visiting room. And time crawled by at the snailiest pace I can ever recall. Wheels spinning and spinning day after day, and every day would end with me not a bit closer to getting out. What I believed would be only a few days slowly stretched into 3 weeks, which might not sound like much, but it felt like 3 years at the time. When one's biggest hope every night is that one will be taken to state prison in the morning, one is clearly living far south of the Mendoza line. Well, it didn't take long for the waiting to develop a voice of its own, and it didn't take long for that voice to start whispering to my impatience, asking my impatience to please kick in and cause me to pull a guard aside and ask him what the fuck was going on with my transfer. But then my survival instinct kicked in a few decibels louder than my impatience and talked me into just hanging in there. So by now it should make sense that when I was rudely awakened by one of the guards at 5:30 in the morning and told to pack my shit, I was positively euphoric, thinking this was truly indeedy a glorious day. At the risk of being embarrassingly repetitive, I must emphasize once again that to me, this was the dawning of the next necessary step towards this ordeal being over. So, 3 of us were going upstate that day. Gary Decker, who got way too drunk one night and was arrested for attempted robbery, although he claimed not to remember any details other than waking up behind bars. Jimmy Thomas, who got way too poor one decade and decided to guide Capital District tourists into handing him their wallets at gunpoint. And of course, me, the blathering boomer. And we were traveling in a style befitting of the occasion. We were handcuffed to belts that were strapped around our waist, and we were put in leg irons. It was the first time I'd ever worn leg irons. Go figure. Let me tell you, leg irons are a bitch, and if you don't know how to walk in them, you can really hurt yourself. But indeed, I was euphoric, and so I barely noticed it when the shackles would hit my Achilles tendons every time I took too big a step, as we were being led to a transport vehicle that was awaiting us. Jimmy noticed it, though. My stumbling seemed to bring out the professor in him. Oh, yeah, and you know what? In the written version of this, because in the reality version of this, he calls me the N-word. It was the first time I've been called that. It was far from the last time I was called that. And honestly, being called the N-word for me, a white guy, was a measure of acceptance. I liked it. I felt like, I took it as endearing. But now, in this day and age of political correctness and racism, blah, 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 I don't feel comfortable saying the word out loud because a lot of people I respect say there is no circumstance in which a white guy could say that word. So I'll just say when the time comes. So yeah, Jimmy noticed me stumbling with the leg irons, and it brought out the professor in him. And that day's lecture went like this. You're going to learn how to walk in these here motherfuckers. You're going to break both your damn legs before you ever get to the police car. That's how he talked. Decker told Jimmy to shut the fuck up, and then one of the guards told us all to be quiet, using his club as a pantomime prop to emphasize his point. I found all this to be morbidly funny, but I knew that my laughter would not add anything good to the scene, so I kept on walking, trying not to stumble and trying to keep a straight face, and we finally got to the car. One sheriff drove, another rode shotgun. We sat in the back. Gary Decker on the left, Jimmy Thomas in the middle, me on the right. Looking back at it all, I guess we're sitting in alphabetical order. Yeah. Hey. We're rolling northbound on I-87, the Adirondack Northway, at close to 100 miles per hour. It's the only time in my life I was ever in a car that went over 90 with no fear of being stopped for speeding. My lawyer had told me that I was a cinch to be placed in an honor camp given my education and lack of prior criminal record, and I could hardly wait. Well, after an almost 3-hour northbound drive, we arrived in the small town of Dannemora, New York. I knew I was going to go through a reception center for classification before being transferred, hopefully, to the honor camp. What I didn't know was the fact that the reception center was a maximum security facility behind a 30-foot-high concrete wall, complete with armed guards and towers overlooking the visible echoes of 100 years of despair and terror. I like that line. I wrote that pretty good. And that was just the first glance. A few seconds later, 6 words came to my mouth. There was a sheriff in close proximity to me, so I uttered them in his direction. I can still remember all 6 of those words. They went like this. You have got to be kidding. I don't remember his reply. I was too busy watching Euphoria exit and reality enter. So, I still say this all started because of a Hot Tuna concert, but I'm not going to get into that, or the Chris Christopherson movie, or the coin flip on the airplane, or the accident in the baby carriage, the job in the library, the Kelco calculator, or the day of my birth. But I will say welcome to the story, because over the next several episodes, I'm going to tell it. Thank you for listening. Peace out.